Give us an idea of where negotiations stand right now. What's the state of play as we head into another strike day?
Well, we're in constant dialogue with the train operating companies in one strand of talks and with Network Rail in the other. We haven't had any new offers from the companies since a few weeks ago. And in fact, for the train operating companies, we've had no offer on pay. But we're continuing to talk to them about the problems that they want to address, the issues, what they call modernisation, and our agenda, which is to get our members a pay rise, because many of them haven't had one for 3 years, and also to achieve job security. But what we need is the government, who got themselves in a peculiar position in the last week or two, as we've all seen, to change their stance, because the key to unlocking this problem is for the Department of Transport and the Treasury to change their stance so that we can get a bit of goodwill around the negotiating table and work up some formulas for resolving this dispute. And I hope that happens. I've met with the new Secretary of State, and she, approached that in a positive mood. We approached that in a positive mood, but we've got to see some substantial changes so that we can create an agreement for all the railway workers and indeed for the public and the taxpayer who want to get on with getting a normal railway service, as do we.
Well, yeah, tell me a little bit more about that meeting with Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the new Transport Secretary. What was different, do you think, about her approach, and do you think it'll mean that you can get a breakthrough?
Well, her predecessor, Grant Shapps, all he did was go on media rounds and hurl abuse at trade unionists and me individually and other trade union leaders, which is completely unhelpful. And he also gave the companies remits that were impossible to fulfil, because even the senior executives in this industry, who aren't our friends but we work with them, know that what they were demanding was impossible for the unions to concede to. So she at least met with us. Grant Shapps refused to meet with me and the other union general secretaries. She's got that out of the way now, so that's pricked that boil, and we can get on with maybe creating some solutions. She's gone into the media last week and said that she wants to work constructively. I welcome that. It doesn't mean that the problems are gone. We've still got difficult issues in the industry. We've got difficult issues with the structure of the industry. But we've got to remind ourselves that the railway companies are making profits all the time. They're living on subsidy from the taxpayer, which the government is providing. And the bosses of these companies, the railway rich, are extracting millions of pounds in their salaries and will be benefiting from this tax break for millionaires that Kwasi Kwarteng provided last week. So I hope that she changes the stance of the government and therefore the stance of the companies, and we can get on with resolving this dispute. Our members can get back to work, they can earn their living again, and the public can expect a good service off the railway. But that's all to be seen in the next few weeks.
Well, yeah, and I put some of those points. I spoke to Dan Paynes from the Rail Delivery Group, which represents rail companies, in the last hour, and I put some of those points to him about railway companies making huge profits, for example. He said that it wasn't true that they made big profits. He said that the profits that they made wouldn't cover a 5% pay increase for workers. And on the subject of salaries, he said that it's the companies that own the rail companies where the bosses earn a lot of money. What do you say to that?
Well, the First Group owns the railway. They own this railway that I'm standing outside now, Avanti West Coast. They are creaming in money. The rolling stock leasing companies paid out £75 million in dividend in the last year, when there was virtually nobody travelling on the railway in 2021 because of the COVID instructions to stay at home. There is mass profit being made. £500 million in profit was extracted from the railway last year between Network Rail subcontractors and the train operators. The executives of these companies are making fortunes, and they've made fortunes since privatisation in 1993, in the mid-90s. They have extracted probably £12 billion of profit since privatisation. And when that gets a bit tight, when the country's got difficulties, or we went through the pandemic, they don't want to play the game. And what they want to do is extract that from railway workers. They also want to milk the public. Fares on the railway are extortionate. Nobody's getting a square deal apart from the executives and the shareholders of these companies. They are making fortunes and they cannot lose. They have no capital at risk in the new public service contracts. They only get revenue. It's like a royalty. Every pound they take in fares, they get a commission from that, and there is no risk to them whatsoever. That's why these strikes are not resolved, because they get indemnified for any losses, and they're getting paid £30 million every time there is a strike. So they've probably received £200 million in strike pay since this dispute commenced. It's a one-way ticket to wealth for the super rich, and that's got to end. There is a railway rich list, and they are creaming it, I can assure you of that.
OK, but he tells a different story. But let's talk about the timing of this strike as well. Of course, this comes a day before the London Marathon. It's going to be really hard for a lot of people to get to the starting line tomorrow morning. Really disappointing for people who's trained an awful lot. But also, it's a massive charity day, isn't it? This is a day that lots of charities rely on to raise a huge amount of funds. And they will be feeling incredibly frustrated. The timing of this strike is pretty awful for them.
Well, the timing of the strike is a succession of actions that we started this process back in March, and we took our first action in June. So it's a long-term dispute. We don't want to target the London Marathon. We've got no intention of doing that. But the way the legislation works in this country, the anti-trade union laws, which we're going to get more of, we have to keep the disputes going to comply with the law. I hope that the runners and the charity collectors and the people that want to raise money, which is a shame they have to do that. It's a shame we haven't got our public services properly funded and we have to rely on charity instead. I hope that they get to the starting line, and I hope that they can have a good day tomorrow. We don't want to disrupt them, but we have to keep this dispute going on behalf of our members. It's also the Tory party conference. They've got no compunction about changing the way that tax works in this country, the way that charities have to raise money. And our action is aimed quite explicitly at the Tory party conference, which is also happening tomorrow. So this dispute will continue, and unfortunately there will be disruption. But if we can limit that through getting a settlement to the dispute, that's what we'll do, and we'll get everyone back to normal. So we do apologise for that disruption, but I'm afraid it's inevitable in a long-term dispute. Whenever we go on strike, somebody or some groups will be disrupted.